Howdy everyone. Now I am moving on to the gear leg fairings. So as I had mentioned, I believe in a previous video, these are aftermarket pre-made fairings. You can see I've got one temporarily up here and I'm working on this one here, this bottom one. These are aftermarket, pre-made. They fit quite well. I'm actually mildly impressed with how well they fit right out of the box, so to speak. So I'm just not a fiberglass person, and I'm quite lazy. I'd rather not fool around with modeling clay and fiberglass and epoxy and who knows what else. So I just went ahead and bought these. I do not plan on doing anything fancy other than putting these on with screws. I don't plan to use any kind of... I'm not going to permanently attach these lower fairings to the pant. I'll put it to you that way. These are not going to be permanently attached to the pant. They're just going to be held on with screws. So, here is my plan, which I've already started. I put the fairing on in place as best as I can fit it. And then I traced around it with a marker. And you can see that tracing here. And just traced around the entire fairing with a marker. What that allows me to do is it allows me to see where the fairing is going to lay in relation to the pant itself, and I can get a visual on where stuff that is hidden underneath here. So like if this fairing were to come out this way any further, it would interfere with the bracket underneath the pant that these screws are attached to. But since it's behind these screws, and I know the shape of the bracket underneath here, if I wanted to put screws anywhere in here, it should be okay. So the outline, like I said, just gives me a reference so I can look around the pant and see where I can and cannot put any kind of mounting screws. So at that point, I figured, looking at this real quick, it really doesn't matter where I put the screws. There shouldn't be any interference. So then I put the fairing back on. I'll try to do this one-handed. Hold on. So I get the fairing on. I hold it in place where I want it. And I just draw these reference lines here across the pant and across the fairing itself. Just a few locations. I actually have 4. I've got one here, I've got another one here, and I've got 2 more in the back. One down here and one right here. So those are my guesstimate locations for where I want to put screws. So I just kind of look at the pant when it's pushed in place, or with the fairing, I'm sorry, when it's pushed in place onto the pant. I just kind of look and see where it might need a screw to help hold it in place. Like I said, these fit really well. So if there was an area that kind of, didn't quite fit flush, maybe that's where I would put a screw, but it seems to fit really well all the way around. So now that I have these marks, again, I just want to make sure when I take this off, I just want to make sure that where I plan on putting a screw, there's nothing immediately underneath here, because once I get the hole drilled into this, that's going to be a nut plate. So I need room on here to put nut plates without anything interfering. So now I can take the fairing and look at my lines and decide what kind of edge distance I want, and also decide if these are decent locations as far as screw access. Because if I put a screw in this location where this line is, am I going to be able to get a screwdriver or some kind of tool in here to get to that screw? So that's another consideration. And I've already done that. I got a long screwdriver out, and I had this in place on the leg, basically where this outline is, and then I had a long screwdriver, and I was just basically test fitting the screwdriver to make sure that I can get to the screws where I have them located. So now I'm just going to figure out where exactly to put the holes in the fairing itself as far as edge distance. And I'll drill this first, and then I'll hold it back in place and match drill. And then ultimately these will come off. I'll do nut plates and things like that. So this is just the initial fit up, trying to get an idea how it fits and where I might need to put some screws. So I'll get some holes drilled, and then I can start using some Clecos, and we'll see what happens. Alrighty, so making progress on this lower fairing. I have it positioned and drilled, and I now have the nut plates on. So again, I'm not going to go into nut plates and match drilling, because by now we should all pretty much be experts on that, right? So I located the holes on the fairing first, and then I held it onto this pant and did the match drill with the drill bit, just made a mark. And then I took these both halves off, final drilled the holes, put on the nut plates on these pieces, and then put this back together. Countersunk for the screw heads on the fairing, on the intersection fairing. So now I've got 4 screws in. I've got 2 here, and I've got 2 in the back. You can see 1 there and 1 back here on the bottom. So the fit all the way around is really nice. Even along the bottom here is very nice. However, you can see that there's quite a gap in here. If I can get that, let me go around to the other side. So here you can see the gap. It closes up here, but there's a big gap here. So all I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to try another nut plate. I'll nut plate this bottom piece, and then I'll just run a number 6 screw down from the top and basically pinch this. Now there's still going to be a gap. I don't want to pinch it too tight, because that would mean putting the nut plate and the screw right up here, right near the gear leg. And I don't necessarily want to do that. And I don't necessarily want to squeeze this so tight that it puts a lot of stress on the screw that's going to go through it, because it could potentially crack. So I'll probably come down from the leg a little bit, maybe back in here like this. Having a gap around the leg is perfectly fine, because there's going to be relative movement between these two, and you don't want to lock that in tight. So I'll probably just come back here somewhere and leave a little bit of a gap. And you can see by doing that, if I pinch it up here, it closes all of this, just like that. And that's really all I'm worried about. You can see that this piece, this bottom edge here, sticks out further than this top right here. So after I get this bolted down, I'll come back and I'll mark this, and I'll clean this up a little bit. You can see that there's a gap here at the very trailing edge. I may trim this off, come down here to where the gap just starts, and then trim this off, but I haven't decided yet. I may just leave it. I like the fairing nice and long. This has not been trimmed at all. This is exactly how it came, and I'd like to leave it as long as possible. I think that just looks better, in my opinion, to have it nice and long. So I don't know that I'll cut this off. I may just leave it. I may just trim this off so the edges are even all the way around, and pinch it with a number 6 screw and a nut plate up in here. Other than that, it came out okay. I'm only using 4 screws to hold it. Like I said, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Fiberglass is relatively thin. You had to countersink for the screw hole. I'm not confident that this is going to last. I'm guessing it's going to crack at some point. I tried to keep the edge distance really beefy as I could. If you get too far away from the edge, then you start getting into this curve area, and as you tighten the screw down, you're going to distort it, and of course that just puts more stress on the screw. You can't beef this up at all, because then it's going to push the fairing up the leg. So anywho, I'm going to go with it, and at some point if they crack, I'll deal with it then. So pinch it, nut plate, screw, trim down the edge, and I'll probably move on to the other side. Talk to you guys later.